And this isn't the first time that he's kind of crossed this line. He, publicly dropped the names of specific family members before. And let me be clear. Any criminal who name drops in public is a ticking time bomb, a liability to themselves and everyone around them. And in my opinion, it's 100% reckless, screams incompetence, and it exposes their lack in discretion. What's up, everyone? So I hope you enjoy the new studio. It's totally not done. I actually just recently moved, and I'm trying to paint. And you can tell I'm an amateur because I got tape on the wall still, but and I suck at painting, which is one thing I discovered. Still got some on my hands and whatnot, but I wanted to make this video real quick. I've been trying to work between moving stuff and paint and do some renovations and stuff, but I really wanted to get this video out. I was also really, really sick for a while. I'm all good now. Maybe I'm still a little nasally. Hopefully doesn't come through as much on here. But anyways, there was a topic that I wanted to talk about that was actually a couple weeks ago, but we're going to come revisit it. It's mainly about dread. Now, one thing that we should get clear right off the bat is that this video isn't just about dread. It's also about Hugbunter and the community that surrounds dread specifically. No single site can really define the Darknet, just as platforms like Meta, Google, or Hacker News don't fully define the internet, right? This discussion isn't really about the Darknet subculture at large, but rather about dread's kind of steady decline into what I see as hypocrisy and favoritism over time. Dread, for a long time, has been a beacon of free speech, and I've been a massive proponent of it. If you look at some of my old videos on dread, you'll see people commenting screw dread. Hugbunter promised in the early days that it would be a bastion of free speech, and dread now feels more like a stage for unchecked egos and kind of selective enforcement for different people. I remember when being on dread felt like this. In this post, you could see that it's basically a place where people could disagree without being completely disrespectful or obtuse. Back then, discussions were grounded in things like logic and facts. Debates, not arguments. Arguments primarily are driven by ego and emotions, whereas debates are logic and facts. Now, this post from 6 years ago really captures the essence that the community was or had back then when it was kind of still a community. Today, the atmosphere has shifted dramatically to boo-looking, basically. And this is true even among the senior staff on Dread. Head janitor, for example, who I've always liked, who really hasn't always liked me, but he tends to curry favor from Darknet market admins, likely for financial gain or meaningless awards that serve no real purpose on Dread. The same pattern can be seen in the news section, where archetypes posts always dominate, always. Even if the content is nonsensical or the posts are just general posts. Any post that is ever critical of these kind of favored entities are excluded under the guise of promoting popular posts, which is what you'll be told if you question the validity of what gets posted when. Yet posts with single upvotes sometimes and very little engagement often take precedence over more substantive content. And that's simply because one might be critical of it while the one that gets promoted is not. This, in my opinion, is the slow death of Dread. Now, think back to the thread I showed you from 6 years ago, a time when the community thrived on constructive dialogue, education, and things like collective growth. Now, try finding something like that today. You might be able to, but you're going to have to search for it. In some cases, you won't be able to find it some weeks. Dread, as a healthy community, is long gone. What's left is kind of a cesspool of really shallow egos and low intelligence discourse that's dominated by many mentally unstable individuals, immature teenagers, sycophants, and cult-like personalities. What was once a beacon of meaningful interaction has definitely devolved into an echo chamber, feeding on toxicity and self-congratulations. The Tor Times has launched a full-blown attack on Hugbunter, accusing him of running a scam under the alias Ghost. But before we actually jump into the details of that, I kind of want to set up the scene and be clear. There's no actual substantive evidence that I saw to actually prove these claims. And I think it's kind of disappointing to me personally to see the Tor Times present what is essentially an opinion piece as a factual piece. According to the article, Ghost created private vendor sites. He charged tens of thousands for them and then vanished, allegedly pocketing up to $300,000. Vendors were left basically stranded with their investments wiped and no refunds that were actually given. So if you're a vendor making decent money, there's really no reason to pay tens of thousands of dollars for a basic e-commerce site to begin with. Hiring a college student to build a site without JavaScript is both affordable and pretty straightforward. You can easily replace the fake branding afterwards. Additionally, it's fairly easy to get a local LLM and build things out too. I would definitely advise the latter, since there's one less person that you have to actually trust in that whole scenario. Turning around and giving that person exclusivity over things like hosting and site management is as reckless to me as handing over your IP or your private PGP key and entrusting a stranger with your customer service. It's basically giving away total control of your brand to someone that you barely know or you barely know anything about. That said, I do kind of understand why some vendors fall into this trap. I've made kind of similar choices myself. So while I'm talking all this shit, it's like I do kind of understand their position. I would reiterate, there's no LLM back then though. And there was no real assistance for it, right? Now getting to the Tor Times. For those unfamiliar, the Tor Times is a niche website that's run by someone under the alias Ethan. It's been a fairly reliable source of news within the corner of the Darknet, and specifically the corner of the Darknet that I like, which is Darknet markets, for a while. Personally, my interactions with Ethan have always been professional. I've always seen him as kind of a level head, and I've had a few discussions with him. That said, the story they presented kind of presented the following narrative. 1. Hugbunter allegedly operated under this alias of Ghost to sell private vendor stores to Darknet market vendors. 2. He reportedly took substantial payments from the vendors only for the services to collapse within months. 3. He then allegedly censored posts on Dread that linked him to this Ghost alt, controlling the narrative, so to speak, to shield his reputation in total. Now, vendors like Winston Wolfe and Free State EU claimed they paid thousands of dollars for vendor stores promoted as the only ones approved by Dread staff. Promises of uptime and reliability quickly crumbled, leaving these vendors with nothing but basically empty assurances despite paying a premium prices. The Tor Times frames this kind of as a calculated scheme to steal or extract funds, however you want to word it, while shielding Hugbunter from accountability. And to be clear, the Tor Times has long been regarded as a credible source of Darknet news. Unsurprisingly, these allegations definitely prompted a direct response from Hugbunter. Now, in the past, we'll go over Hugbunter's actual response, but in the past, I published stories that Hugbunter absolutely disliked, disagreed with, or just outright really, really hated. Typically, he'd reach out afterwards. Me and him would discuss whatever issue there was and resolve it. Now, I did reach out to him for this video on the same medium that we've always used, and there was no response back, so there's that. One example is an article that I wrote for my website, which is doingfedtime.com or sambent.com, whichever one you want to use, had the title of Daily Dread Drip and specifically Don't Trust Verify. And it was a response basically to a post that Hugbunter had made on Dread about the Bohemia admin being arrested. The article emphasized a really simple but very important point, which was that blind trust in anyone is extremely dangerous. And that's a position that we should all hold. The first line absolutely made it clear that the piece wasn't claiming Hugbunter was wrong, but instead it addressed the broader issue of blind allegiance and blind trust as a whole. On Dread, much of the community tends to rally around whoever is the most popular at the time. Whether they're a Darknet market admin or a vendor, they do this until the same figures inevitably exit, scam, or betray their supporters. And despite this pattern, Hugbunter remains a kind of a constant as the site's leader, and this much has absolutely been the same throughout the entire history of Dread. Now, through all the exit scams, various Darknet market admins that came on the scene, some were loved, some were hated, Hugbunter has pretty consistently been the one breaking stories and keeping the community informed. And that's why I include that kind of thumbs up, if you will, in the article. And at the time, the link he actually posted when I saw it had no mention of a Darknet market admin or Darknet anything, really, not even the keyword. I use Control F. Naturally, he was really upset when he read my article that basically pointed out speculation and ambiguity from his original post on Dread about the market admin being indicted or whatever to begin with. Our initial contact was pretty tense, but as always, Hugbunter remained respectful. And that's kind of his style. About a week later, he came around and acknowledged that I had actually been right, and during a follow-up discussion, he explained that the feds likely edited the story after its initial publication. The unredacted version reportedly named the Bohemia admin and also discussed details, but the details were removed before later being reintroduced. So when he made the post in which he mentioned the Darknet and the Darknet market, when I saw the same article, it had been removed, hence my blog post. And later, he was able to verify this using the Wayback Machine. So what's my point with all of this? If you're going to do things like challenge, especially if you're going to challenge Hugbunter, you want to do it with facts, right? And not assumptions. You want to do it in a provable way. And in my article, I showed him a significant amount of respect, even though I hadn't seen what he was saying because it wasn't in the article at the time. And that was just because, in my view, he's earned that respect. By and large, he's a pretty big staple in the community, regardless of what critics say. And unlike many in the Dread community who rely on hearsay and kind of emotional arguments, he consistently uses logic, from what I've seen, and evidence to support any claims that he's making. And that's one of the things I really like about him, is because it's not just kind of a blind following. Hugbunter has pushed back firmly against the allegations that the Tor Times leveraged against him of being Ghost. And his response, basically, to sum it up, was that Ghost is not his alias, but someone he trusted within the community. Obviously, don't trust, right? It happens, though. It's just human nature. He recommended Ghost based on prior positive dealings with him, but now deeply regrets that referral, understandably so. The shutdown of the stores was due to technical issues, not fraud, apparently. Hugbunter has accused the Tor Times of biased reporting, suggesting that they're pushing an agenda rather than pushing the truth. And while he hasn't specified what that actual agenda might be, he defends Dread's censorship policies as measures to try and curb harassment, not to silence legitimate criticism. The real problem, for me anyways, lies in the glaring double standard. It's how controversies are actually handled on Dread. Posts filled with outright lies, for example, which I've debunked with hard evidence, and even poorly executed doxes, including personal ties and suggestions to look up my family, are often allowed to remain up for months. And sometimes they're even pinned to subreddits. And we see literally staff asking permission to remove them. Meanwhile, posts critical of Dread staff are immediately locked or deleted within hours. Just like if you criticize a market that is in favor or spends money on Dread, the same thing will happen, right? For example, a thread about me stayed pinned for months, despite there being no actual facts to back it up and it relying completely on emotion and it being fairly invasive. All Hugbunter did was acknowledge it existed. Now, contrast this with a thread that criticized him. It was locked within an hour. The hypocrisy is not just apparent, it's pretty infuriating. If you're not Hugbunter, I've been called every name in the book. And again, the more they mention my name, people watch my videos. Whether you like my video or you don't like my video, it doesn't really matter. You still watch it. Now, FUD campaigns have been absolutely launched, and a lot of the times, even after someone like me exposes them to be outright lies, the threads still stay up. And one was so riddled with falsehoods that it actually took me 90 minutes to dissect it and debunk everything in the hour-and-a-half long video, which I have no problem with because it gives me content. My point is that baseless allegations from Darknet market admins, like Drug Hub admin, for example, who has accused me of extortion, being a rat. And the funny thing is, when I question him about it, he has nothing to say but that he's richer than me. And I would hope you would be, considering the fact you run a Darknet market. I reached out to him as a professional courtesy to let him know that I mentioned him in a video, and his response was basically to publish my PM, which only, again, boosts my views and gives me credibility, and then had the audacity to call me an extortionist and a rat. And again, when I asked him on 3 separate times for the evidence to back up his claim, his only comeback was bragging about being richer than me. And let's be honest, that's kind of expected from someone running a Darknet market, right? It's like there's nothing like, it's literally like playing on God mode and saying, oh, I'm beating everyone and being amazed by it. But when I pressed further, he basically defaulted to calling me a snitch. In my case is public and very open source. So I challenged him to provide proof. And instead of facts, he rambled about things like traffic on his website, which is kind of comical when it's during a massive DDoS attack. I remind him that running a drug market doesn't make him exceptional, right? He profits off people selling drugs and others buying them to get high. And that's it. It's an e-commerce site at the end of the day. And when I pushed him for any evidence, he vanished. He ran away. And that's Dread, right? If you go make a thread about Drug Hub, though, exit scamming, or you say, hey, he's really Papa Bear, he really exit scammed, and now he's coming back, that'll get taken down, right? You'll get banned. Or you'll have your account suspended, which should be expected if you're going to lie and engage in like psyops with the community or with individuals. My point is that it's enforced with markets, but not necessarily with individuals 90% of the time on Dread, and this is one-sided. This is an issue. In that same thread, a Darknet market admin sank even lower and openly encouraged people to dig into my family and boasted about how easy it would be. He claimed that my father's job was interesting, which is really kind of funny considering the fact that last time I spoke with him was probably like 2 years ago, and he hadn't worked in about 5 years. The guy was a truck driver when I met him when I was 20. So this admin, like so many others, has no idea what he's actually talking about. And it's just pure desperation out of nowhere, just to not lose what they think is some godly image they have, which is really sad. Another example of these thin-skinned, kind of over-emotional clowns resorting to things like outright lies and logical fallacies just to protect some kind of illusion of dominance that they have because they created a website. And this isn't the first time that he's kind of crossed this line. He, publicly dropped the names of specific family members before. And let me be clear. Any criminal who name drops in public is a ticking time bomb, a liability to themselves and everyone around them. And in my opinion, it's 100% reckless, screams incompetence, and it exposes their lack in discretion. Now, I'm completely autonomous, which means all my information is out there, and I'm not hiding. My name is very well known, my email address, all that stuff. So finding out information about me is not some amazing accomplishment. It's all publicly available. And this is something I've said from day one. So pointing out that you found it is not an accomplishment. Anyways, lack of discretion, though, is pretty damning if you're the head of an international criminal conspiracy. If this is what he does when he's angry, just imagine the kind of reckless chaos that he'd unleash under real pressure from law enforcement. And these kind of little digs are the things that really, really show people paying attention what kind of person you're actually dealing with. And it's about me, so maybe I'm invested in it, but take it from a disconnected standpoint. Do you see an issue here with a guy that runs an international drug conspiracy, naming names, and he hasn't even been indicted? I mean, kind of a issue here. I think there's a danger to everyone, including even vendors. Now, meanwhile, Hugbunter's critics are silenced almost immediately, right? Any kind of threads that are calling him out are locked within an hour. This is fact. The bias isn't just blatant, but it's really systemic. If I were to post FUD about a market or any kind of staff or moderators, it would be deleted without question. No one would have an issue with it. I'd likely face a ban, like I said before. But again, when a market admin goes on there and they can say whatever they want because they pay. They can target whoever they want. They can encourage harassment. And that's absolutely swept under the rug. I mean, am I crazy? Like, please, in the comments, let me know if you think I'm wrong or if I missed something. And I'd really love to hear it or be educated on the subject if maybe I'm just not seeing things clearly. The same admin, for instance, who basically outright threatened vendors for simply creating accounts on a competing darknet market. This double standard isn't just unfair, it's absolutely gutting the platform's credibility piece by piece. And again, at the end of the day, these admins come and go. There's never been a permanent market, right? And they usually leave in a bad way. But basically how the game works is they pay for advertising and then they're untouchable. Like, donate some money, hand out some meaningless awards, and suddenly you've trained a legion of dread teenage users to parrot positive reviews about you and your market. These awards are basically nothing but shill badges, a way to manipulate perception. If we follow the money, it becomes clear where does it actually go? How do you get awards, right? I digress, but I'm getting sidetracked. I could absolutely talk about this kind of craziness for months, and that's mainly because there's so much of it out there. I have a long history with Dread and have a really strong love for it. I have for years. In its announcement thread, when it was first announced, I was there under my vendor alias, excited to see it. Lately, though, it's gotten more and more toxic with just bootlicking and people literally writing love poems to Dread staff, or the fact that the so-called news literally always has archetype on the top, unless it's a story that makes them look stupid or criticizes them or points out factual issues or logical fallacies. In that case, it's never talked about from what I've seen. Anyways, I've never seen stories like that really given any kind of priority. And in fact, we've seen a steady flow of awards given to those who bootlick the hardest. The ones who do simp the hardest for those darknet markets are absolutely rewarded. And it's not really any shock to see the biggest advertisers and donors able to get away with basically anything they want. So if that's the case, and it's pay to win, who actually owns Dread? I've known Hugbunter for a long time. Something like 8 years now. I mean, I don't know exactly. It's been a while, but before Dread existed, I remember him doing posts on Reddit talking about various vulnerabilities that he had found in various darknet markets. And this is like 2016, 2017, something like that. Maybe 15. I don't really remember. My memory sucks anyways. But I do remember hiring him to do a vendor shop for me. And I didn't end up getting the site due to external factors, none of which were actually his fault. I saw his work firsthand in making vendor shops, and it was absolutely solid. He ended up refunding me when bigger clients took precedent, which, again, totally understandable. Capitalist system. It is what it is. But he offered me multiple alternatives to keep me happy in spite of this. And I think if he ever was like a vendor, he would probably be a Gamma Goblin. He'd probably be an exceptional vendor. Gamma Goblin was a very long time vendor who sold a excellent product at a very good price. But Hugbunter has always been professional and honest in my personal dealings with him. And that's, as far as like what I know about him as an individual, that's what I know. Now, does that mean that I'm blindly defending him? Absolutely not. The claims against him absolutely should be scrutinized. But so far, the evidence provided by the Tor Times is kind of flimsy at best. It's kind of like the Drug Hub admin's statements, where it's like, I can say Drug Hub or Archetype is going to exit scam within the next year. And if I don't have evidence of that, you shouldn't take me seriously. And that's it. We shouldn't take anything seriously that anyone says unless there is proof or precedent to back it up. Now, there have been darknet vendors stating that Ghost ripped them off, testimonies, circumstantial claims, to me, just are not proof, especially when there is a small amount of people that are actually complaining. And again, like, this is kind of why courts don't allow things like hearsay unless there are very compelling reasons. Without hard evidence, this boils down to a lot of kind of he said, she said. As all this kind of drama nonsense started on Dread, the home of kind of damsels in distress now. So really, this isn't just about Hugbunter, this video specifically. It's more about the darknet community and how we handle accountability, or with Dread, people are kind of trained to not. They're trained to just go automatically with whatever the most prevalent person on there says. The selective enforcement of moderation rules on Dread also absolutely undermines trust, especially even the fact that the people that are actually contributing aren't always going to be there. And at the end of the day, no one can really say with certainty what's happened. What's clear is that the hypocrisy in how those situations are handled. I hope Hugbunter actually makes a post on Dread and pins it about this accusation from the Tor Times and actually invites people to come in and put their 2 cents in. In my opinion, that kind of level of transparency would absolutely be best. And that's the real issue here, is transparency. Until the community demands consistency, user accountability, and uses logic to follow these kind of things, we will perpetually see people in this cycle of accusations and censorship, and it'll never end. The one thing that I do love about Hugbunter is he tends to stay factual. When Dread started more than half a decade ago, it wasn't about lame news that is basically an ad for top markets. It wasn't a bootlicking competition that Sam Whiskey tries to frame as all the popular posts, which is a lie if you look at them. I showed you at the start of this video how far Dread has changed. It used to revolve around the users, free speech, and security, to quote Hugbunter. Now it's more about darknet market admins owning it by proxy with ad revenue, which is very reminiscent of other major platforms like YouTube, which used to allow things like DMs to creators and for you to say and express yourself however you want, which is obviously no longer the case at all. Or Reddit, which was actually known for their kind of hands-off approach. Over time, though, they began banning controversial subreddits that they personally didn't like, or their advertisers didn't like. Facebook was in the same kind of boat in its early days when they emphasized user-generated content and self-expression. And then it kind of slowly rotted to what it is now, where they just openly prioritize advertiser-friendly content and sell user information, and has really, really heavy moderation and implements algorithms to try and promote engagement and advertiser interest over organic reach. And I think we see the same thing starting on Dread. The decay of sites, in my opinion, is almost a natural evolution. It's not just these sites either. We could see a ton of other sites that kind of follow the same precedent, Tumblr and MySpace, as well as a whole slew of other sites that have came and went. And the bias and the perpetual boo-licking is what really made me not even want to be anywhere near Dread. The lack of any kind of semblance of logic and the cult followings, unquestioning, is just nonsense. I get on Facebook and it just seems to be this super toxic place filled with trolls and FUD for the most part. And that very much reflects Dread, in my opinion. They recently hit 400,000 users, but even that was kind of a hollow number, as Paris ended up admitting. They're going through and they're deleting a good portion of those actual accounts, up to a fourth of them, 100,000 accounts. So I don't even really understand what the point of the post was to begin with. The fact that you can have 100,000 accounts that shouldn't even exist in the first place is it kind of points to the fact that proper moderation, if nothing else, definitely hasn't been happening as a whole. So I'm not really a fan of Dread anymore. And I hate to say that, but I spent way more time on places like Pitch, which is much smaller, but I think it has a lot more quality people. They recently hit like 10,000 users, so it's super small. That said, if Dread did shut down tomorrow, the only thing that would happen is that people would move to another site. Like, people like to think that it's like this irreplaceable thing, but it's just another darknet market site, basically. And it's absolutely replaceable. And there'll always be someone out there to replace it. Like the technology, there'll always be technology to replace the ancient technology. Things always evolve. That's just kind of the nature of life in general. Now, Hugbunter has stated in one of the comments that he wished that basically Ethan had reached out to him. And again, I just want to emphasize the point that before I actually made this video, I did attempt to reach out to him. I had no success, however. I had a darknet market admin also reach out to him on different communication platform. He in fact did succeed in reaching him and letting him know that I was waiting for him on this other platform. And the only thing Hugbunter really said was that he had forgotten that he was even on this other platform. So, I mean, I was hoping to be able to hear what he had to say, and I would have loved to be able to put his side more into this whole thing, but that didn't happen. So I do like Hugbunter. I think that he is a massively positive force for darknet markets in general. I think he's done a tremendous amount of work throughout the years for them. But I also think that Dredd has gotten fairly toxic. And I think that that's a problem for everyone, any and everyone that's in the community. I think the community doesn't just revolve around Dredd staff and market admins. And I think that at the end of the day is the actual issue, is that the users and the vendors are much less focused on in general. I think Dredd tends to focus on things that really, there's a lot of stuff that they could focus on. I think the cleanup of the accounts, the 100,000 rubbish accounts, that's a great initial start, but it also shows how little is actually being done in terms of taking care of the site as a whole. I'm not talking about the code base or the back end. I can't speak to those things because I don't know anything about them. So you could absolutely have Paris and Hugbunter be like, oh, we've done all these things. Great. Like, that's awesome. I'm not talking about that because I can't verify that. So to me, it's irrelevant. It requires blind trust. And I don't think anyone should have that in that situation, even me. I don't want you to watch this video and just blindly trust me. Find ways that you can show that alternate viewpoints of maybe how I'm wrong. You proving me wrong doesn't make me lose value, in my opinion anyways. It is actually an added value because I learned something. And that's kind of the hope I have just with this channel in general, is that we can all gain value. We can all learn from these different things, these different scenarios, these different news events and items and topics that I discuss. And I know I learned a ton from the comments. So I love seeing what you guys have to say, because at the end of the day, it leads to new videos. And that's how, if any of you have been around from the start, which a ton of you have, that's kind of where I started, was your questions, right? Your statements, taking those and featuring those as videos. And I love that kind of user-generated content, because this is far from my community. It's our community. And I'm not just talking about this channel or the people I have discourse with. I'm also talking about on the Darknet. That's our community too. Like, these Darknet markets, these Darknet forums are nothing without the people that participate on them. You can have a forum with all the best Darknet market admins, all the best staff, the most amazing people of all time, right? And it doesn't matter if there's no user base. So we are what makes these sites great. And not just the few individuals that are on there that are moving money. And I think that, like many big sites, we have Darknet market forums that completely lose sight of this. And that's an issue. I dislike the fact that we can see posts about individuals, and those individuals can be talked about in negative ways, but we talk negative, or you see someone talk negative about a market or about Dredd staff specifically, and it's shut down immediately. That I dislike that immensely. I have plenty of people who talk bad about me. I have no issue with people talking bad about me, because, like I said, it's PR, right? And if you watch a video, you watch a video. AdSense is AdSense, so engagement is engagement. When I saw the admin of Archetype talk about how he watched one of my videos 4 times and he hates it, I'm like, okay, cool. Thanks for watching. It doesn't hurt me. It's just funny watching people react like that. But my point is, I think these places that originate with free speech should keep that, because that's how they grow. That's why they're even relevant in the first place. It seems almost like a vendor who does a real good job for a while and then starts to selective scam to a point where people figure out that he's ripping people off and they totally abandon him. They build up this good name. They use this good name that they have to kind of take money. And there's really no way that you can kill a reputation quicker than that. And there's really not a worse way you can go out than that way. So for me, it's just really off-putting. I don't want to make a video about it. And I'd love to know what you guys think about all of this if you actually watched it all. So thank you. And I'm very happy to be back. My next video, we'll talk about some things I actually made for you guys, specifically, like actual things that I'm going to put out there that you can use if you choose to, that are free. And as always, I'll see you in the next video. And it won't be weeks till the next video.